Hey everybody, how you doing? Great Saturday to you. Real quick, I noticed on Twitter that Leonard Nimoy's name was a trend as I make this. And I went through, couldn't quite figure out why his name became a trend at that particular point in time when it did. But as I say, it is what it is, right? So I thought, okay, I'll go on to, wait a minute, I have something to contribute. Actually, I have a lot to contribute, but there's this one episode of my life that really just sticks out. And it sticks out because I was a freshman at the University of Texas in Arlington. I went to UTA for what I designed as my undergraduate degree in urban planning, and then I went to Cal for my master's of city planning, and had a wonderful time at Berkeley, and wound up having a wonderful time at UTA my final 3 years. But of a rough adjustment period for the first 2 years. One of them actually saying was the first 2 years, first year and a half, because I left 4.5 years later. But my freshman year was roughest, but the bright spot was being on the Forums Council. Forums Council was this group that put together these events where a featured speaker was the focus of dinner and audience. And the featured speaker was generally a celebrity, like, for example, the Steve Landisberg, who was on Taxi, or in this instance, Leonard Nimoy. Now, I was then, before that, and still am now, a big Star Trek fan. We're at Star Trek convention in Oakland in 1975 and 76, started our Star Trek club and was president at Bret Harte Junior High School, watched the Star Trek original series episodes an average, I would say, of 40 times, something like that, in my life. No kidding, okay? I've done it all. I've interviewed William Shatner. Never had the pleasure of interviewing Leonard Nimoy more currently during my Comic-Con time. But in this time, it was my first events. Leonard Nimoy was our guest, and I was stoked. I was like, yes, this is awesome. Oh man, this is going to be incredible. Leonard Nimoy. And he, as it turned out, did not want, I'm kid you not, he didn't want to talk about Spock. And he said that. That was the rule. We have a tradition, or had a tradition, of having this pre-event dinner, right? And pre-event meeting. We get together, just us, not the audience, just a group. A heady experience for kids to be in a room with a major celebrity like Leonard Nimoy, or having dinner, breaking bread with him, right? And because he didn't want to talk about Spock, everyone was just frozen. But I had done my homework. I actually bought his book Equus, about his play, and I read about it. And so when Mr. Nimoy was introduced, in just a fantastic experience, just to have him come out and think, wow, you are in the select group of people talking to Leonard Nimoy. We sat down, and there was a silence after his introduction and everything. It was a long silence. And finally, since I'm the chief conversationalist and people sort of look to me because I like to talk, right? Still do. I said, hey, Mr. Nimoy, tell us about Equus. His face lit up. And he talked about his love for horses, the play, what it meant. And that really opened up the conversation to other subjects. We never once talked about Star Trek at all. We talked about his motivations for the play. And we talked about where it was going to be appearing and so on. We never talked about Star Trek. We followed his rule. We really did. But it took me a long time to figure out why. Psychologically, he did that. And then I bought his book, I Am Not Spock. And I bought his book later, I Am Spock. And you know what I think it is, folks? After all this time, I now really hit me. He wanted to be known for something he did. Not just Star Trek, which was, even though it gave him fabulous wealth, at the time, I think he wanted to be known for something else he made himself that spoke to whatever was going on in his mind at the time. And that mental journey brought him to Equus. I think that's what that was, you know? So I can say basically that, yeah, I was there for Leonard Nimoy's personal journey into that part of his life where Star Trek for a time didn't exist. But I was always hoping that what would eventually happen, and did happen, happened at that midnight night at the meeting. We could just talk about Star Trek, right? He got out of it eventually. And became an incredible representative of the pop culture that I grew up in the United States of America. So there's my Star Trek story, and if you see this and you're with UTA, hey, feel free to pop by in and ask questions, or even reach out for a live stream to discuss this, right? And I can talk about UTA then, and you can talk about UTA now. A lot of my life has been spent since then essentially representing the University of California at Berkeley. I was on the alumni board for 7 years. And I think the reason why I was disconnected for so long is I came to UTA out of California. At the time, there wasn't the internet, and Texas felt like a 20-year step back in time. It was hard to adjust to. I did it. I learned a lot about myself in the process. So there's my Leonard Nimoy story. Subscribe to Zenny62, bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. And live long and prosper.